Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Model Kit Review. In today's fun model kit review video, we'll be looking at Accurate Miniatures classic P-51C Mustang in 1/48 scale. This is Accurate Miniatures kit number 3419. In this video, I'll be giving a brief history of the P-51C. We'll be looking at the built-up kit, and I'll talk about some of my finishing and weathering techniques that I used on this build. I'll be going through the instructions and try to highlight any problem areas to watch out for. We'll be looking at the detail on the interior parts of the kit. We'll also take a look at the detail on the smaller parts like the landing gear. We'll look at the surface detail on the exterior of the kit as well. We'll look at the kit supply decals and the marking options that are included in this kit. We'll take a look at the clear parts and talk about the fit and clarity of those. I'll also talk about any aftermarket parts I've used in this build. Many consider the North American P-51 to be a war-winning aircraft. It's one of the few fighter aircraft of the conflict that combined excellent performance with incredible range. The P-51 was used as a fighter bomber, and an escort fighter during the conflict. The early P-51s were powered by an Allison V12 engine, and that engine gave great performance below about 15,000 feet, but above that, the performance really suffered. Because of this, the P-51 really didn't come into its own until the Merlin engine was fitted, and the Merlin engine had a dual-stage supercharger that allowed it to fly at much higher altitudes and have excellent performance throughout the altitude range. Armament on the P-51B consisted of 4 50 caliber machine guns in the wings, and it was also capable of carrying underwing ordnance. Looking at the instructions themselves, these instructions are different from what you'll find in most model kits, and they do have some pictorial diagrams, but they also are very verbiage heavy, and so you have the steps written out on one side, and then you have the picture showing everything going together. And on the Accurate Miniatures kits, it's pretty critical to read down through the instruction steps. So you just want to make sure to do that. There are also separate written painting instructions that go along with each construction step. It's good to refer to those. These are easy to follow. They're actually more detailed and more informative than you'll find in most model kits. Looking at step 1, this is the cockpit assembly. There's no real problem areas in step 1. And if you look at the detail on the interior parts and what can be seen through the cockpit canopy, it looks really nice. One addition I made to this build was to attach the Eduard pre-painted photo-etched seat belts to the pilot seat. That really dresses up what can be seen through the cockpit canopy. There's a lot going on in step 2 of the instructions, and honestly the picture here is a little bit deceptive, so it's really important to go through the written instructions and make sure you do things in the sequence that's outlined in the written instructions. The first thing we're doing is adding the tail sections to each fuselage half and letting those dry thoroughly. The next thing we're doing is adding the cockpit sidewall detail to each fuselage half. We're also adding the cockpit floor assembly, but we're leaving off the seat, and that is part 19, and we're also leaving off part 13, and that's a frame that goes just behind the seat until after the fuselage is actually closed up. I also left the prop off until after the model was painted. Once the fuselage halves are joined, part 13 can be installed, and then the final step is adding the seat, which is part 19. Moving on to step number 3. Once again, there is a lot going on in this step. We are building the wing assembly, we're attaching that to the fuselage, we're also attaching the tail planes, and then we're assembling and installing the landing gear. There are just a couple of areas of caution that I'll give you here. The first thing to note in step 3 is that parts 28R and 28L, and those are the inner landing gear doors, should be modeled in the closed position. On the P-51, these doors were hydraulically activated. They ran on the same hydraulic system as the flaps, and so if the flaps on a P-51 are up while it's sitting on the ground, these gear doors should be up. The next item to watch out for in step number 3 is the wing guns. Accurate Miniatures would have you add these wing guns after the wing is assembled. If you do this, you are guaranteed to lose wing guns back into the wing. To avoid this, I simply glued the wing guns in place before attaching the upper and lower wings. I also drilled out the machine gun barrels at this point. Step 4 is the final step in assembly. In this step, we're attaching the cockpit transparencies. You want to make sure to add the rear windows first. Those are parts 63R and 63L. And there's not really anything tricky with adding the rest of the small bits to the aircraft. I was able to get a really good fit on the clear parts, and on my particular model, I chose not to add the underwing fuel tanks at this time. Looking at the painting and marking guide, there are 2 marking options included with this kit. Both marking options are for 528th Fighter Squadron P-51Cs in natural metal with the yellow tail and yellow spinner. The one I chose to model was flown by Lieutenant Lester Erasmuth. Erasmuth ended the war with a confirmed tally of 6 air and 5 ground kills. For the exterior color on the aircraft, I airbrushed some acrylic aluminum paint on the airframe. I'm not super happy with the result. There were some small lumps in the paint that I just couldn't smooth out. Before decaling the aircraft, I weathered it with pastels, and then I clear coated that with future floor polish in preparation for decals. The decals themselves are of very nice quality. They're thin, they're in register, the color is spot on. Once the decals were applied, I sealed those with a final satin clear coat. Looking at the surface detail on the kit, it's represented by engraved rivets and engraved panel lines. The panel lines and the rivets are very, very fine. These were world class at the time of this kit's debut. The surface detail is not as rivet heavy as, say, a modern Edouard model kit, but what is there looks great, and with detailing, these model kits still hold up well. In conclusion, I'm really happy with the way this kit turned out. It really looks nice on the shelf. The kit itself built up great. I love the detail on it. It has adequate detail for the interior. It has adequate detail on the exterior. The decals are superb. I like the more detailed painting instruction that this kit provides. And if you take your time on this one, you'll be rewarded with a very nice build. I'm not sure if any of the other kit makers have released a P-51C in 1/48 scale, but the good news is this kit is still a great kit that can be turned out nicely. I would recommend this P-51 to modelers with a little bit of experience, simply because the construction sequence isn't as foolproof as it would be on, say, a Tamiya kit. Well, I'd love to know what you guys think. If any of you have built Accurate Miniatures P-51C, please feel free to comment in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, model on.